Hello, I'm Di-Fanteria. This is The Art of War, an Orsus history, FIELDCRAFT. Not seen nor heard, part 2. The Watchers become the watched. In part 1, we looked at perhaps the oldest problem in FIELDCRAFT. How do you find somebody without them finding you? And we discussed the Mark I eyeball. From the hunter came the scout. From the scout came increasingly specialized observation and reconnaissance. But eventually, another problem emerged. Because if you can watch somebody, somebody can watch you. And once you know that, the game changes. Welcome to the world of surveillance and counter surveillance. The watchers become the watched. New Jersey, 1992. Hugo and Felix Chavaz know that the Equus are under surveillance. They could avoid the watchers, or they could confront them. Instead, Hugo does something rather more interesting. He gets behind them. Before sunrise, the two establish themselves roughly 100 yards behind the opposing surveillance teams. They exploit darkness. They hide their vehicle in a secluded position. And they choose their ground. Then they simply watch the people they are doing the watching. The watcher has become the watched. Hugo and Felix sit opposite the Stevens Technology Institute in Hoboken, in New Jersey, in one of the Equus Land cruisers. It's 05:15 local time, and the area is almost deserted. Sunrise was to come at 05:27, so they had the benefit of darkness and manoeuvred into position 100 or so yards behind the watchers that they had very easily spotted. The engine was off, and the blacked out windows made them impossible to see. They had only been there for 20 or 30 minutes and had a well secluded vantage point to observe their surroundings. The opposing team of four, 100 yards ahead of Hugo and Felix, were split into two less than well equipped vehicles, and they had been in situ for nearly 8 hours. And since they had begun their mind numbing task, they remained unconvinced that it was utterly pointless. They were all ex-US military of varying calibers and had spent the last 2 years working for the man. They didn't know who he was and only knew he lived in Manhattan, not in New Jersey. Their orders for that late night and early morning activity had come from the very tall one, who was fucking weird, man, to say the least. One of the vehicles was an old beat-up truck that effectively blended in anywhere except over the other side of the Hudson, so it didn't stand out in Hoboken. The occupants had always stuck together. They were both Marines, were full-on hoorahs, and were violent and racist. They had served together for 10 years before seeking out the big bucks on the circuit. Miguel Estancia was almost 40, had no children or spouse of any category, and was a disgruntled ex-sergeant who had been drummed out of the Corps for sexually abusing a young Marine cadet. He was of average height, with a slight paunch, and believed himself to be the reincarnation of Eli Wallach, which he most certainly wasn't, not even close. His oppo tolerated him because he was of the same deprived proclivity, a tall man from Jackson Hole in Wyoming, from generations of farming stock. His name was Walter Jedson, and he was as big as the bear, but had let himself go slightly over the last few years. He had a young family of 3 that he never saw nor cared for. He was, in fact, a total vacuum, a personality bypass, who lived in a world of war games and rifle ranges, and they were an extremely unpleasant couple. The larger of the two was dying to go to the John, but his diminutive and more senior partner informed him that he would have to go au naturel. They couldn't leave their post, as the other team had gone for a 30-minute furlough to get something to eat. They would be bringing them back something appropriate, he hoped. Tacos or burritos for one, and a huge cheeseburger for the other. For fuck's sake, kid, can't you hold it until they get back? Said Miguel. No way, man. I've been sitting here seeing jack shit for hours, drinking this soda. I need to go, or I'll piss in the car, man. I mean it. Okay, you fucking stinking Sasquatch. Go behind the truck. There's nobody around anyhow. Thanks, amigo. He was out of the pickup and emptying his bladder in seconds, much to his relief. Unfortunately for him, the truck was in the direct line of sight of Hugo and Felix. Tubbs, I'll deal with Hightower. Oh, and why do they call you Tubbs? Asked Hugo. Do you know, I haven't the faintest idea, but I suspect it is an ironic juxtaposition of the fact that I weigh, and always have done, under 11 stone soaking wet. Oh, the jolly British military humour. You just have to love it. Well, Felix, you are certainly on my wavelength. Just keep an eye on the other one. He will be our takeaway. The fact that the big one couldn't wait or didn't pee in a bottle shows that he's not a candidate for OCS at Fort Moore, Georgia, and that's for certain. Be ready for the grab. I think we will leave with the live one and let the other team panic when they return and find the abominable snowman has eaten the yellow snow once too often. Once he is down, you get the other prick out of the truck, and then you can give him a sharp gift to help him sleep. You good? Let it play, my boy, let it play. Behind the beat-up truck, the stinking Satchwatch, Walter Judson, was halfway through emptying his bladder. His eyes were closed, and he was very relieved indeed. Felix Chavaz checked the syringe with 125 milligrams of ketamine inside was intact. He then took off the protective cap on the point of the needle that he had applied before leaving HQ. He then soundlessly exited the cruiser and started his approach. Hugo was silent and almost invisible as he crept into position for the takedown of the Sasquatch, just as he had been on that cold night in the forest near Micey Abbey many, many years before. As Jedson started to button the flies on his jeans, he turned his back away from the direction that his nemesis was approaching from. It was nearly first light, but the area was still gloomy. Hugo was carrying one of the small versions of the Fairbairn Sykes fighting dagger. He didn't need MVG, and was on his target before the jeans had been closed over. The stiletto pierced the right side of the neck as Hugo's left hand clasped the tall man across the mouth. He dropped him down, wiped the knife off on the man's jacket, and moved around the truck as Felix pulled the driver's door open violently and pulled Estancia out before he could resist. Hugo then covered his mouth and held him around the chest, locking the man's arms in whilst kneeling behind him. Felix jabbed the syringe straight into the left side of his neck, and within 30 seconds, the nonce had gone limp. Felix lifted him over his shoulder, and within 10 minutes, they were on their way back to HQ with their prize. 5 minutes later, a purple Ford Landau, filled with the odours of fast food, pulled up just where Estancia's truck had been parked. Unsurprisingly, the local police would not be informed that a 6'4" ex-Marine was bled out in the car park. What it did mean was that the Hoboken surveillance was postponed until they had dealt with the discreet disposal of the body, which gave the Equus Bellucci an opportunity. There is nothing particularly glamorous about that, which is precisely the point. Surveillance can be remarkably boring. Hours of watching, waiting, recording, identifying people, identifying vehicles, visitors, times, routes, habits, and relationships. But gradually, isolated observations become information. A person leaves the same building every morning. A particular vehicle arrives every Tuesday. Two people who supposedly don't know one another repeatedly meet. A target always walks home along the same road. What looks insignificant once may become extremely significant when it happens repeatedly, and patterns emerge. And the moment somebody suspects surveillance, another discipline enters the game: counter surveillance. Am I being watched? Am I being followed? Who is interested in me? Is that vehicle actually parked there by chance? Have I seen that face before? Did somebody enter the cafe shortly after I did? And perhaps the most difficult question is, can I find out without revealing that I know that? And that last bit matters, because spotting surveillance is useful. Letting the surveillance team know that you have spotted them may not be. Orsus gives us a very different surveillance problem. At Waldemore Avenue in Fulham, Ellie McDade needs eyes on number 48. It's Helen Augustine's London residence. But rather than putting three people in a car outside, Hugo provides something considerably better: a legitimate reason to be there. We have let a property for 10 days from Finder's letting agency, which is on the corner of Fulham Palace Road. The agreement has been signed and the keys have been picked up. The place is a top floor flat with a roof garden and two bedrooms. And luckily for us, it's almost exactly opposite number 48. I've sent you the listings page, which will get you there. They have all the equipment you will need. Think about what that gives them: elevation, line of sight, shelter, duration, a legitimate presence, and critically, somewhere from which to watch without looking as though they are watching. The observation post doesn't look like an observation post. It looks like a flat, which brings us to camouflage, because camouflage does not necessarily mean making yourself invisible. Sometimes the best camouflage is simply looking as though you belong, and Waldemore Avenue takes that idea considerably further. After an hour and a half on the South Western train from Salisbury, Ellie had already received notification from Hugo that he had two guys who would meet her in Fulham. To her delight, he had some more crucial information to impart. Immediate. This is Eagle. Eric and Ernie will be at 39 Waldemore Avenue, Southwest 6, 5LN by 1500 hours Zulu. Details to follow. I will call you at 15:45 hours Zulu. Good luck. 1400 hours Zulu, 2604, 1992. Just as he had indicated, the phone in Ellie's pocket rang at precisely 15:45. Eagle, it's good to hear from you, and I'm delighted that you have found me such entertaining companions. No problem. We aim to please. We have let a property for 10 days from Finder's letting agency, which is on the corner of Fulham Palace Road. The agreement has been signed and the keys have been packed up. Now, I know it's Sunday, but we do have a few back doors, as you know. The place is a top floor flat with a roof garden and two bedrooms, and luckily for us, it's almost exactly opposite number 48. I've sent you the listings page, which will get you there. They have all the equipment you will need. Speak soon. Gotta run. Thanks, Eagle. Spot on as usual, she said as she was leaving Parsons Green Station after a 20-minute journey on the District line. Using the map gleaned from the location on the listing he had sent, she walked through the streets of Fulham until she was looking up at the rather smart frontage of a house on the corner of Waldemore and Hestercombe Avenue. Very nice, and not cheap either, bloody hell. She pressed the bell for flat 3 and immediately laughed, as the sound emanating from the squawk box was pure Eric, aka Sergeant Brian Titchnoble, 22 SAS, now retired and working for William Cochrane, the 1st Earl of Dundonald. Hello, my dear Gruach Ruad, and before you ask, the fucking kettle is on. Cheers, Xander. Let me in, will you? She responded without missing a beat. The door buzzed, and she was in. As she started up the stairs, she heard from the door speaker behind her. Xander? I'll have to look that one up. But I suspect it's an intellectual way of saying you are a short arse. Oh, for fuck's sake, this is getting too much. Ellie almost felt sorry for him. 17:15 Zulu. In the living room of 39 Waldemore Avenue, ex-Squadron Sergeant Major Billy Worthington, 2 SAS, codename Ernie, started the briefing as all of the kit they needed for the upcoming operation was placed on the dining table. Now we all have a brew, we can begin. We will conduct phase 1 to discover what we're up against. We are only too aware of the threats, but there could be more. So we need to think creatively, despite having some sophisticated gear kindly delivered straight from Box 5 this afternoon. Specifically, hidden devices, cameras, microphones, bugs, pressure pads, lasers, wiretaps, and videotaping. Then concentrate on geolocation tracking, such as GPS or cell site data. You both know the form. As per SOPs, we will conduct an internal visual environment check first. So without egg sucking, we look for the obvious first. Smoke detectors, the finger test on all mirrors, air filter equipment, books, wall decor, electrical outlets, desk plants, tissue boxes, stuffed toys, sofa and armchair cushions, tabletops, shelves, wall sockets, hairdryer holders, wall and alarm clocks, clothes hooks and radios. Remember to listen as you walk through the rooms. Motion sensor cameras can emit a slight audible buzz when they are switched on. We will do this in darkness using pen lights and NVG. If their kit is unsophisticated, then red or green LEDs will blink or shine in low light conditions. We all have an RF signal detector with lens detection included. I think they are Spyhawks, which will also work in shower heads and bath taps as they're waterproof. We must turn off and unplug everything that emits a frequency signal. Kitchen appliances, baby monitors, TVs, and so on. We then need to do the same externally with houseplants, holes in the doors, statues, the doorbell or knocker. Here's the floor plan that Molly sent over this afternoon. I mean, it's a big gaff, so we may not get this done as quickly as we would have liked. Ellie, you take the top floor and join me in the kitchen. Tiny Tim, you'll take the whole first floor. I will concentrate on the cellar, hall, and living room, and then Ellie and I will cover the kitchen. Probably best if Ellie sweeps the garden at the rear and the frontage, as we don't want a friggin' elephant falling over the geraniums. I think we can only do the counter surveillance work tonight. Then we can get our gear in on Monday. Taff said not to expect too much, but we must thoroughly go through the whole place to be sure. Any questions thus far? I move more like a felis than your average loxodonta, but probably for the best. Shall I list out what we each will carry and how best to infiltrate? Good idea. Cheers, Dumbo. Wanker. Okay, so we have a penlight tactical gloves, comms pack with earbuds, an RF detector, NVG, torch, and spare batteries. 2 is 1, 1 is none, and a miniature Furbein Sykes dagger in a sheath. Although this is the first time we have had these sent over. We got them last week. I presume you've used them before, Ellie. He held up 3 polycarbonate containers and handed them out. These are Taft's ceramic Glock 17s with a silencer. Very nice they are too. Has he named them yet? You know what he's like. Yes, I've fired one a few times. I don't think he has a name yet, but we could make recommendations post this op, said Ellie, as she loaded the magazines and, cocking the pistol, tucked it into the back of her jeans. Good stuff, Billy said. I suggest we do a full kick check and study the floor plan. Tom Thumb can then talk us through the infiltration plan. I hope it includes exfil too. Of course it does. You'll be calling me Midget Jem next, you tosser. Oh, my very big friend, the list is endless, and I plan to use it. Billy then started checking his kit, as Brian and Ellie did the same. For once, Brian said nothing. He was thinking through his strategy to combat the bantam-based banter he had suffered for longer than he could remember. Ellie finished her kit check quickly and made some more tea in the kitchen. The 2 men soon sat with her at the kitchen table, drinking happily. What happened to the hobnobs? Asked Brian, smirking as he said so. Hobnobs? You ate enough for at least 3 heavyweight boxers when we stopped at the Bratty wagon. He paused for effect. Ellie, I have never seen such a breakfast. I couldn't even see his little face over the huge mound on his plate. It was gargantuan, and wasn't in the end enough to satisfy Danger Mouse here. Fortunately, I have a biscuit stash with me, so fill your boots, Midget Jem. It was very kind of you to think about my dietary requirements. I am forever in your debt. He grabbed a handful of the rolled oat biscuits and then began to outline his ideas for infiltration and actions. He was once again holding his cards close to his chest regarding the banter. We are in luck, my friends. Regarding infill, as you no doubt couldn't fail to notice, number 46 is covered in scaffolding. The same is true for number 44. Therefore, there will likely be strangers around. Not necessarily today, but it could provide us with much needed cover. It's unlikely that any of the residents know who the contractors are, and as I found out, the actual work hasn't started yet. They have only just completed erecting the scaffolding and are due to kick off the renovation project early this week. The frontage of the target house has a high hedge and a large bush, which could allow an approach akin to straight up the middle with bags of smoke. I would advocate for a bold strategy at this particular Chinese parliament, where our chosen camouflage should be the Hi-Viz vest and safety helmet. It won't look suspicious if we're lugging the kit around. My only concern is all of us being in there and no one manning the laser microphone, having eyes on the street or a direct line back to HQ. Inspired. What do you think, Ellie? Asked Billy. I agree. It's an angle I would not have considered, but it makes absolutely perfect sense to have one of us on overwatch. Bearing in mind that last light isn't till after 9, getting in during the early evening would look less odd than our sneaking around at 2 in the morning. I would get in, as Brian says, using the builder's bottom ruse, and then exfil more covertly once we are done. Nice work, Brian. Oh, by the way, we've just recruited someone bigger than you from Berlin. Can't wait to meet another short round. I have to say that I now concur and am warming to the building site bottom analogy. Very nice, Ellie. Billy said, based upon our relative dimensions, I would say that Brian gets us across the road carrying the gear, as we adopt the officer with a clipboard ploy. With Brian mooching at the front wall, we can do the initial front sweep and then gain entry. At this point, you fall back here, get the laser on, and we will crack on. This might add significant time to the job, but we might be lucky, and the place will be relatively clean. If Helen had been using the place exclusively, I would have doubted that Daddy would have bugged the toilets. It's what, 15 minutes to 6 now? I will go on the call and give William a brief outline, as I think we need to cross the start line before 19:30. Does anyone have anything else? Abort is Mohican as usual, and we're on channel 5, said Ellie. She then returned to look at the floor plan, while Brian began setting up the laser microphone. Roger that, from both the men, was followed by Billy giving Brian a pat on the back. Good job, big fella. Really solid as usual. Thanks. Brian Titchnoble was immediately deeply suspicious that he hadn't been provided with another opportunity to discover more of the list of names that his old pal had alluded to. He thought that this was very much in the post and was pondering who the new bloke might be, so he just nodded, saying, Cheers, Billy. I need to now get some Hi-Viz gear and some safety helmets. There's a contractor's van parked outside number 44, so hopefully I can pick up what we need. It hasn't moved all afternoon, and judging by the parking situation here, they're holding the spot for the morning. Just confirmed. We have line of sight with the PKI. It's all set up on the tripods, and both the emitter and receiver, as well as the recording kit, are working, so we're good to go. Once you two are inside, I will test the signal strength. Right, I'll see you in 5. The breaking and entering of the van was hardly that at all. It was extremely easy, and Brian was in luck, as there were about 6 sets of vests, coats, and helmets of varying sizes in the back. He would worry about fitting a little later. His main concern at that moment was that the van smelled like someone had thrown a dozen body odor grenades into it and then died in the process. That is rank. That's nearly as bad as Arctic's bed space.
A high visibility vest. Think about that for a moment. One of the most conspicuous garments imaginable, being used as camouflage. Because the purpose isn't to make the wearer disappear, it is to make the observer think. Nothing unusual there. Builder, contractor, workperson, somebody who belongs beside scaffolding carrying equipment. You've seen them, but you haven't noticed them. And there is an enormous difference. Military camouflage attacks recognition, colour, shape, shadow, outline, texture. But human beings also recognize things through context. A person carrying a ladder beside a building site attracts little attention. The same person carrying the same ladder through a hotel lobby at midnight probably does. The object hasn't changed. The environment has. Good fieldcraft, therefore, isn't merely about hiding from somebody's eyes. Sometimes it is about controlling what those eyes think they are seeing. And the Waldemar plan continues.
My only concern is all of us being in there and no one manning the laser microphone, having eyes on the street, or a direct line back to HQ. Inspired. What do you think, Ellie? I agree. It's an angle I would not have considered, but it makes perfect sense to have one of us on Overwatch. Bearing in mind that last light isn't until after 9, getting in during the early evening would look less odd than our sneaking around at 2 in the morning. Once again, Fieldcraft. Timing, light, environment, behaviour, Overwatch, and a very simple appreciation. 3 people sneaking around at 2 in the morning looks suspicious. 3 contractors moving equipment in the early evening probably doesn't. The darkness might actually provide better physical concealment, but daylight provides the better cover story, and that distinction is rather important. But Waldemar Avenue gives us the other half of the equation as well. Before you establish your own surveillance, you need to know whether somebody else has already established theirs. The team therefore conduct a counter-surveillance sweep. And this is where the modern version of not seen nor heard begins to acquire a technological dimension. Titch switched on the PKI emitter that was aimed directly at the front window of number 48 Waldemar Avenue. He received confirmation that the invisible beam had hit the target, then proceeded to the next step. After 5 silent minutes, he brought the receiver into action and was happy to report to both Billy and Ellie that there wasn't a soul stirring in the front room, at least. Not even a moose loose about that hoose, he said, and Ellie was then just as quick to finish the lyrics of the 1958 smash hit Hootsman by Lord Rockingham's 11. Och aye, Hootsman, it's a braw brick, moonlit nicht, och aye. They all started laughing. And it was a valuable moment in the context of the overall mission. It broke any nerves or trepidation they may have had as they prepared to put the first card on the table for Operation Masterman. It's a well-known tenet that anyone who boldly professes that they are not nervous before a potentially perilous operation, even a critical sporting event at any level, is probably either a liar or a sociopath, or both. If the latter is the diagnosis, such a person should not be standing in the door in the first place. Have you done a complete kit check? Everyone got the Hi-Viz plus helmets? Billy asked. Both Ellie and Brian nodded. The Hi-Viz vest had to go through a quick wash and tumble, as I couldn't put one of those stinking things on, said Brian. Thank you, Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, was all Billy could muster in response to this. Right, let's get weaving. As planned, Ellie and I would go out in front and complete a mock review of the scaffolding. Make some notes, have a quick natter, and then we'll call you over, Titch. You dump the gear inside the high hedge of number 48. If all is clear, you stay put, and we'll do the frontage sweep, and then go in through the front door, sans the luminous clothing. All okay? Yes, Billy. I'll then bag up your building site gear and get back to monitor the area utilising the Mark 1 eyeball and the PKI, said the little washerwoman. Right, let's do a radio check, Ellie said, as they all completed the final step in the pre-op readiness drill. With Billy leading, they exited the front door, and the live performance began. It was now 1935 Zulu, and the streets of Southwest 6 were very quiet indeed. This fact alone made the requirement to play act redundant. There was not one person on the street, so Billy and Ellie didn't indulge in the amateur dramatics and got straight into position behind the hedge as Titch dropped the bags of gear for them. They grabbed what they needed, did another quick kit check, and then started the frontage sweep. Brian had gone and was now on watch from number 39. A soft click in their ears was followed by, "Erica's eyes on. All clear. Out." In 30 minutes, the house's exterior was cleared and declared clean. They could see no obvious alarm systems, so it took another 15 minutes to ensure there were no pressure pads on the doorstep. They then made certain that the entire frame of the door was checked for anything that looked out of place, specifically metal on metal, which would indicate a circuit that would break if the door was opened without it being immobilized, triggering an alarm. The threat was not limited to the emission of loud noise or contact with a security firm, which, in the circumstances, was highly unlikely. Rather, a signal was sent to whatever setup Bossart had in New Jersey. The door frame was declared clean, and they then immediately made an entry, as it was an easy lockpick for them. Once inside, they unplugged anything within reach and then scanned the area with the spyhawks. Again, it was clean, so they began both the visual check and continued unplugging and scanning as they moved forward. It took Billy an hour to clear the cellar and get started in the kitchen. By this time, Ellie was on her way upstairs, where 3 bedrooms and a bathroom awaited her. It was now 21:20, and it was dark outside. They both switched on their pen lights and NVGs and carried on the methodical task. At 2200, Billy pressed the mic and said, "This is Ernie. We're at approximately 40% complete. Sit rep at 2300. Out." Ellie finished sweeping the back garden by 2250 and then made her way to the top floor, which had a bedroom, a bathroom, and an area for storage in the eaves. "Hello, Eric. This is Ernie, now at 80%. It will be clear in figures 60, over." "Roger that. I'll be in the front garden at 0 dark to help with the kit and exfil. Out." 10 minutes after midnight, they were back in number 39, enjoying a brew Titch had prepared. He had even made a pot of tea with a red woolen cosy, which convinced Billy that Titch was morphing into the mother hen. "Will you be tucking me in tonight, Mumsy?" he teased. "If you want, my little Percy-Poo, you'll need to have a nice hot bath, put on your Mr. Tosspot jammies, and clean your teeth, or else there will be no story for you. And while you're at it, perhaps you could go and fuck yourself for good measure, my little ray of sunshine." Ellie had passed her accepted tolerance level, and without a word made her way into the bedroom, shaking her head and giggling to herself. She was soon fast asleep. Immediate. This is Ernie. House clean. We'll start phase 2 mid-morning as we have cover from the builders. 0030 Zulu. 2604, 1992. He followed this up with a smile to his old pal. "I'm going to bed, Mother, unless you want to wipe my arse." "Perhaps not, but if you're very lucky, I might tuck you in bed and read you a story." Now, compare that with Micey Abbey. At Micey, the Knights look for movement in the trees. At Waldemore Avenue, the team looks for something watching from a smoke detector. Different technology, and the same question. Where is the observer? And importantly, what might betray them? Is it a reflection, a tiny light, a radio frequency transmission, even a faint audible buzz? The observer is looking for signatures. The person conducting counter surveillance is doing exactly the same thing. But watching a house from a prepared position is one thing. Watching people who are moving is something else entirely. And shortly afterwards, Ursus moves the problem to France. Well, to Limoges Airport, in fact, where there's no prepared position, no roof garden, no fixed observation post. People are moving, vehicles are moving, police are present, passengers are coming and going. The surroundings are completely civilian. Ellie identifies the Mangonel surveillance team and establishes that they are operating from two vehicles. It's the same requirement, but in a completely different environment. And that is where I want to leave them, because Limoges introduces the next part of our story. At Waldemar Avenue, Hugo could arrange the ideal observation position in advance. But what happens when the ground gives you no obvious place to watch from? What happens when a surveillance car would immediately stand out? What happens when the environment itself dictates how you have to operate? And that brings us back to one of the oldest fieldcraft lessons of all. You do not tell the ground what you want it to be, you look at what is actually there, and you adapt. Part 3, Finding the Vantage Point. We'll be in Limoges, Op Bindi, we'll be at the Grove in Portland, we'll meet the Pirate and Mad Dog McGlone, because sometimes the hardest part of watching somebody is finding somewhere from which to do it. I am Di-Fanteria. This is ORSUS, the art of war, fact with fiction walking beside it, dedicated to dreamers everywhere.